Thank you, Rabbi Yaffe, George Klein, and the members of the Yom HaShoa committee for the opportunity to share my father's story. And thank each one of you here today for bearing witness to the telling of my father's Holocaust survival story. It is each of our responsibilities as Jews to not only tell these stories, but to heal these stories to ensure that we will all remember. For in remembrance, we honor those who were lost their lives in this tragic historical event. And as difficult as it is, I now better understand how important it is to tell my father's story now, as well as in the future. Let me start off by saying what an honor and blessing it is to be able to tell my father's story with my father here today. As many of you know, my mother is also a Holocaust survivor, and her story has been told countless times before, as it was made into a documentary called No Place on Earth. It is one of those inspiring and amazing Holocaust stories in which 38 people survived in a cave in Eastern Europe. Entire families consisting of children, parents, and grandparents. My father's story, on the other hand, is quite different, as you will hear. It is a survival of hardship, and it has been kept private for the past 75 years. In fact, I myself only heard it for the first time 7 years ago, and then a second time when I was started to prepare for these presentations today. Many in our family have never heard the story, and will hear it for the first time with you here today. I want to acknowledge that all Holocaust stories are dramatic and moving, each and every one. I've heard them over the years, and all of them have an effect on us. Because by definition, if you survive the Holocaust, it was a survival against all odds, and therefore contained dramatic and moving events. As Hitler and the Nazi killing machine was truly unimaginable, the diabolic combination of pure evil and precision planning led to destruction of life on a level that is still beyond the comprehension of any rational human mind. So let us begin. When I was asked to tell the story, I was asked to provide a theme. I did not create a theme today, but I do have 3 important points that I want you to remember from my father's story. First, miracles, miracles. Second, optimism, optimism. And third, keeping one's faith. I will start, when this comes up, by providing you a geographic overview of where my father came from and what his town looked like and where he was when he was a boy in Eastern Poland. I will then narrate my father's story by telling it to you in his own words, in the first person, as if he was telling the story directly to you. I was asked to tell the story, I was asked to have a theme. I did not have a theme per se, but I do want you to remember 3 important points today. My father's story. First, miracles, as I said, optimism, and keeping the faith. I will start by providing a geographic overview of where my father came from, as I said before, and then I will narrate in his own words. This is the map of Europe in 1933. You have Germany and Poland in the middle of this map. Poland is bordered by Germany on one side to the west, and on the other side bordered by Russia to the east. In Russia, Stalin comes to power in 1927, after the death of Lenin, the father of communism in Russia. Stalin is the leader of the Bolshevik Party, which is the Communist Party. In 1933, Hitler comes to power in Germany and is elected as the leader of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, known as the Nazi Party. This is the map of Poland in 1933. Note the borders once again, and also note there is no country called the Ukraine. The Ukraine was just a region inside of Poland to the eastern front. Take note of the blue box as well as the red box inside. You can see the major cities of Lvov and Tarnopol as reference points inside this blue box. Lvov is on the top left corner and Tarnopol is on the right. This is a map of Galicia. Galicia is a region of Poland in which during the turn of the century, in the 1800s, Jews were allowed to own land and do business as by official decree of the King of Poland. That is why so many Jews came to live in this region. It had the highest concentration of Jews in all of the world at that time. Note the blue box again in our reference cities of Lvov and Tarnopol, and the red dot that are the red dot in the upper left-hand corner on the right side. And the red square in the box, that's Kosovo. That is the town where my father came from. Now you can get a sense where Kosovo is in relation to the rest of the country. Of critical importance is the understanding that Kosovo is close to the border of Russia. This will become relevant a little later into the story. This is an actual map of Kosovo in the mid to late 1800s. Note a large central square in which there were formal market in the middle of that town. It included stores, it included places where you could purchase food, clothes, and household items. It was a prospering town in Eastern Europe. What did it look like? There were no paved roads. All the streets were dirt. Transportation was by horse. And the town was made up of Jews and non-Jews. 1,700 Jewish families lived in this town of Kosovo. The Jews in the region were a mixture of Poles and Ukraine people, two ethnic groups that lived side by side along with the Jews. That is what life was like in Kosovo, similar to the life that had shown in Anatevka and Fiddler on the Roof. It was a good life in Eastern Europe where young and old lived together. Extended families lived within walking distance. Marriages were prearranged. There were people that had little and there were people that needed much. In each town, though, there was a rabbi, and that rabbi was very well respected. He was an important figure in town as he was revered as a learned man. Judaism was central to all of life's activities. If one had a difficult problem, it was brought to the rabbi to be solved. Common disputes, offenses between different people were even decided upon by the rabbi. There was also a large non-Jewish population in this town that lived side by side with the Jews in Kosovo. The non-Jews were Poles and Ukrainians. Some were good and some were bad. There were several churches and priests in this town. And that's what life was like in Kosovo. This is the single family photo that my father has of his parents and his grandmother. His father, Mechel, his mother, Faiga. The grandmother is seated, and sitting on her lap is Haicha, the firstborn. Haicha is my father's oldest sister. She is 5 years older than him. Malcha, the secondborn, died in 1938 of pneumonia. My father is 10 years old in 1939. He had a younger brother. His name was Willich, and Esther was the youngest sibling of the five. These two photos are of Haicha and Malcha, his older sisters. These are the only three photos that my father has of his entire childhood. In 1939, Hitler signs a pact with Stalin. I was 10 years old when the war started. I am the third child born to Michal and Faiga HOCHMAN. We live in a town on the outskirts of Kosovo, a mid-sized town in which is now the Ukraine, and at the time was Galicia. That was the southern region of Poland. Together with our parents, our home was a home to Haicha, Malcha, my two oldest sisters, and my younger siblings, Willich and Esther. On September 1st, 1939, the war started. Esther was 5 years old. Hitler and Stalin made a treaty to carve out Poland between themselves. Hitler's army marched into Poland and stopped at the River San. In our part of Poland, we saw the Russians invade. They confiscated land and outlawed stores and businesses. There was only one store that you had to stay in line to buy food. Everything now belonged to the government. This lasted until June 26, 1941, when Hitler reneged on the deal he made with Stalin and declared war on Russia. This is when the Germans came to us. The Germans set up a Jewish council and identified the Jews in our town. The Gestapo started issuing orders to impose on the townspeople. The first order was for all Jews to wear a white armband with a Jewish star. The next, they ordered the Jews to take everything away, collect the jewelry, the furs, anything of value. The people that lived in small neighboring villages had to come to our town. That was another order by the Gestapo. One day, the Germans said they were building roads and they needed men for their work crews. They said that these men would work a few months and then they would come back home and others would take their place. We never saw these men again. In 1942, we started to hear about actions. We really didn't know what this was. People started to make hiding places. On the first day of Sukkot, the first action came to our town. German soldiers and Ukrainian police surrounded our town. They went from house to house looking for Jews. They found them in their hiding places. The people were pushed into cattle cars and taken to the concentration camp in our region, which was Belzec concentration camp. Later, we were to find out this camp was the first to use cyanide gas to murder Jews. Many of my uncles and cousins were among those taken. This happened in other towns near us too. A few weeks after the actions, the Germans made a ghetto in our town, and all the remaining Jews that were living in the area around our town had to come to the ghetto in Kosovo. We now lived in the ghetto. One Saturday, the Gestapo ordered the Jewish police to round up 20 people. They lined up 20 people, and they killed 10 of the 20 people. My mother was one of the 10 people that was shot on that day. A few months later, towards the end of 1942, the Gestapo had another action in the ghetto. This time they made the men dig a large opening in the ground. There they shot 300 people on that day. Children were thrown into the pit alive without shooting them. And then the entire pit was covered over with earth, both the living and the dead. By 1943, the entire region of Galicia was made Judenfrei, meaning free of Jews. The Gestapo closed the ghetto and killed every Jew that they found. My father, brother, 2 sisters, and I ran away and into the fields that surrounded the town. At first, we could hide in the tall cornfields. It was wet, it was cold. In the autumn, the farmers cut the crops for harvest, and we could no longer hide in the fields any longer. My father said we will need to find a hiding place. We found a barn that was on the outskirts of town. There we hid for the part of the winter of 1943. The owner of the farm did not know we were even there. My father would go out at night to get food. Some farmers he knew gave him a piece of bread or a small potato. My father was in danger all the time when he went out to get the food. We stayed in this barn for about 5 or 6 months until March of 1944. As spring approached, my father knew the farmer would be coming back to the barn we had been hiding to get the hay for his cows and his horses. We were afraid to be discovered, turned in, or killed by the farmer himself. It was a sunny day in March when my father, brother, and I left the barn to find a new hiding place. The snow came up to our knees. Someone must have seen us walking and called the Ukrainian police, as my father, my brother, and I were caught. I started running as I remember thinking I did not want to be shot from the front, better to be shot running away in the back. I heard the shots ring out for my father and my brother. I went back to the barn where we were hiding to get my sisters, who had remained behind. Now that my mother and father were both gone, my older sister, Haicha, she was now in charge. She was only 19 years old, I was 14, and my younger sister was 8. She taught Esther and I the Ukrainian prayers to prepare us, telling us if we were caught that we should never tell anybody that we were Jewish, and to say that our parents were killed by a bomb. She taught us what to say and how to act. She was trying to do whatever she could so that maybe one of us could survive. The 3 of us set off to find a new place to hide. We found a Polish woman who said she was willing to hide me and my older sister, but not Esther, my younger sister, who was about 8 at the time. The Polish woman was afraid that she would make noise in the attic, and be discovered by the Ukrainian police. The punishment for hiding Jews was death to all. Haicha, my oldest sister, had to make a terrible, terrible decision, but she believed by sending Esther away was the only chance that maybe Esther could survive. She told my younger sister that she must go to a nearby village and find a family and say that she was an orphan, and in that way maybe she might be able to have a chance to survive for herself. My oldest sister and I watched as Esther walked away. Haicha and I hid in the attic of a Polish woman. The attic had no chimney, so the smoke from the fireplace filled the attic. We had our heads covered with blankets to keep from choking. We were in that attic for only a few weeks when the Polish woman became afraid that we would all be discovered by the Ukrainian police. So she told us we had to leave. My sister and I were forced to leave the safety of this house in April of 1944. Unbeknownst to us, it was only 6 weeks before the liberation. Outside, we could see people working in the fields as we left the house. Within minutes, the Germans had stopped us and had the guns pointed at us. They took us to a stable. There was another family captured by the Germans in the stable, but we didn't talk to them. We were told that we would stay in the stable overnight, and the next morning we'd be taken to Borjan, a larger city. The next morning, my sister and I asked the guard if we could go around back to the barn so that we could relieve ourselves. Haicha made another extremely difficult decision. She knew if we both tried to escape that they would come after us, but if she stayed behind the barn until they noticed that we weren't there, that would give me enough time to run away. She decided to stay behind that barn. So as soon as we got out of direct view of the guard, I started to run. The guard didn't come after me, as he figured I would drop somewhere not too far away or be captured. My sister sacrificed herself so that maybe one of us could survive. Once away from the barn, I just kept running until I reached a river. I ran along and then into that river so that the dogs and the police couldn't track me. I stayed in that river all night, sleeping in the water. When I woke, my legs were frozen. I could hardly stand. I got up. I started again to look for another place to hide. I reached another small village where I saw someone I knew. I thought to myself it was not safe for me to stay there, as I might be recognized by this person, so I kept moving. Eventually, a horse-driven wagon came by, and I jumped on it, and I rode until I came to another village. I stayed there for 2 weeks, getting a job in which I took the cows and the horses out of the barn and into the fields. This village was only 3 miles from my town. It was now mid-May 1944. At that time, the Russians attacked the German army, and the Russians took back the territory I was in. The Germans were retreating. As I saw Russians passing by, I told them I wanted to go with them. A Russian captain, who happened to be Jewish, said that he would help me. As I was speaking to him, a Jewish man from my own town happened to come up. He recognized me, and he told me that my uncle and 3 cousins were alive, and they were at home in Kosovo. He said I should go back and be with them. I headed to my town to be with my Uncle Simon and his 3 sons, Isaac, Eli, and cousin Harold. They were now my only remaining family. In May 1944, we were liberated from the Germans, and I stayed in Kosovo with my uncle and 3 cousins for another year. In August of 1945, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin signed the pact that officially ended the war. Polish Jews were offered an opportunity to move to Bytom, a bigger town in Poland where we were given apartments from former Jewish families that were no longer there. My uncle and 3 cousins and I went to Bytom, where we stayed for several months. We learned that we could get to the American zone to immigrate to the United States, but we needed to go through Czechoslovakia. So one night we crossed the border into Czechoslovakia by foot. Border guards were bribed to allow us to enter. Once in Czechoslovakia, there was a truck there to take us to the American zone in Germany. We arrived to Garbazee, Germany, which was the displaced persons camp known as DP Camp Garbazee. It was 15 miles from Munich. We stayed in this DP camp until the summer of 1947. We learned skills so that we could use those once we arrived to America. In the summer of 1947, my cousins and I boarded the USS Marine Fletcher warship headed to America. My Uncle Simon would join us later. We arrived in America 6 weeks later. I was 18. I arrived in America with my cousins Eli, Isaac, and cousin Harold. My Uncle Simon was a very special man. He always treated me like a son, maybe better. He would now play a major role in my life. The cousins treated me as if I was a brother. We all started a wholesale meat business together in Manhattan. My life would change, though, in a positive way when I met my future wife, Sonia. She was 16, I was 19. 3 years later, we would marry, and Uncle Simon would walk me down the aisle. 6 years after arriving to America with nothing, I was able to buy my first home in Bayside. We started our family there. Florence was my first child. Uncle Simon and my 3 cousins were homes in Bayside as well. The 5 of us lived within walking distance. But something was causing me great pain. I had terrible nightmares about what I went through. I had a recurring dream that haunted me about my younger sister Esther. I thought maybe she was still alive back in the Ukraine. And then in 1958, a miracle happened. She was found. My Uncle Simon traveled back to the Ukraine, and he stayed there for 6 months to get her out. United States Senator Halpern passed legislation so that she can come to America from behind the Iron Curtain. A miracle that she survived. She was only 8 years old when she walked away and was taken in by a family. Just as my sister Haicha had said and had hoped. She survived, and she was now with me again. In 2010, my father went back to Kosovo.
Look what happened to the cemetery. There's nothing here left. I have to say a prayer. My name is Harold HOCHMAN. 65 years since I was here in Kosovo. And before the war, there was a happy city. There was Poland. We had it good. But once when the Nazis came in, it was a disaster. They made action. They used to kill. And we used to live like animals. My mother is buried here. My sister, my uncle is buried here. The Nazis killed them. In 1942, and we had to leave the ghetto because the Germans said there's no more ghetto. All the Jews had to be shot. So we went to villages and we were hiding, me and my father and my brother, my sisters, 2 sisters I had, and then the police came after us, the Ukraine police. They killed my father and they killed my brother, and I ran away. I never believe it, I'll be back. But I made back, thank God I'm here. And I have a nice family in New York. And she's a very good wife. And he's very happy. But when you come here, it's very sad. Why they killed, you don't know why. Why they kill human beings for nothing. You know? And this is my story, you know.
started off this morning, I asked you to remember 3 things related to my father: miracles, optimism, and keeping the faith. Miracles. My father's survival was just that, a miracle. And the reconnection to his sister some 18 years later was a second miracle. Optimism. He is a man who was a boy who had lost everything. He was never bitter, never angry. I've never heard him complain about anything or anyone. He is a warm and caring soul with an unlimited patience for others. He has taught our entire family the important lessons in life. He has shown us by example the meaning of loyalty, kindness, compassion, and devotion. He is someone who always enjoys a good joke and finds the good in people, and he has refused to live life focused on the bitter moments. That is optimism. Keeping the faith. In spite of everything my father went through, he has kept his faith in God and in Judaism. It provided him the foundation as to who he was and who he is today. Faith has played a central role in his life. Prospering in the new land, and despite all of the tragedies and hardships my father experienced in his life, he was able to create a new life in America, in this land of hope, in this land of opportunity. Here's my father and mother with Eli, Isaac, and cousin Harold with their wives. The HOCHMANs were always together. My father and mother had 3 children, Florence, Linda, and myself. Over time, my father enjoyed many celebrations. Here he is with his first grandchild, Liza. Here's my dad at Emily's college graduation. That's my daughter. And here is our family 2 years ago at a wedding of my nephew, Andrew, being married to Taylor, who is here today with us. Courage, strength, and selflessness. My father's family demonstrated these characters. His sister HOCHMAN was a hero. As a girl of 19, she had to make many heart-wrenching decisions. Then she made the ultimate sacrifice to save a brother. She had hoped that at least someone should survive. It is clear now that HOCHMAN succeeded, for because of HOCHMAN, both my father and Esther are alive today. On this Yom HaShoah, we honor and remember all of those who were lost. Thank you.